Hi everyone, Dad Battery here, and thank you for joining me on my channel. So today's video is going to be on my husband's childhood NES. The reason for this video is we've been having some issues with the games staying down and not popping back up. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity to take it apart, have a look on the inside, and maybe dust it off. I also wanted to test out some new games that I bought, and I bought them because I was able to find a Power Glove. If you didn't know, the Nintendo Entertainment System is not the same as it is here in Japan. In Japan, it was called the Family Computer, or Famicom for short, and it was released in Japan in 1983. So the interesting thing is the Famicom was never released as you see it in Japan, in America. It was actually changed for the American market. The reason it was changed is because of the video game collapse, and they wanted to change up how their console was portrayed in the market. So they stopped using words that had to do with consoles and games, and they decided to make it an entertainment system. This also meant that they took the top loading that the Famicom has here in Japan and made it a front loader because they wanted it to resemble like a cassette tape. So aesthetically, it was more pleasing for the American market, whereas the Famicom was more appeasing to the Japanese market. So the NES was kind of released in separate stages. So it was released to a limited market in 1985 in New York, and then in California in early 1986, and the rest of North America in late 1986, and in Europe in 1986. And there were 17 games that it was launched with. There's also something I read about them being worried about dry states in America, like Arizona and Texas, and electric shock. So front loading was less of a hazard than top loaders. I don't know how true this is, but I definitely thought that was interesting because if anybody knows, walking around areas where it's very cold or really dry, you tend to shock yourself a lot anytime you touch something. Another awesome thing that I was able to get a hold of was the Power Glove. And this was an accessory. It was released in 1989. Even though it was licensed by Nintendo, they actually had no part in the design of it. So we already have a couple NES games, and I know I've talked about them before, but since we got the Power Glove, I thought this was a great opportunity to check out some of the other games that are specific to the Power Glove. So let's take apart this NES and see how dirty it is on the inside, and then we'll try on the Power Glove and give some games a try. This is what my husband's childhood NES looks like, and it is in really good condition, and I believe that is thanks to the bag that my father-in-law bought for it when he bought the system so that you could carry it around and store it. I've never taken one of these apart, so we're just going to have a look at it and see where everything is at, but in all, it's in really great condition. There are 6 screws on the back. They're all Phillips head. The only issue I had was the 2 in the middle were really deep. So I needed to go borrow one of my husband's screwdrivers that has a longer bend on it. And I do own a couple of the swappable ones. And let me know in the comments if I'm doing something wrong, but I have not been able to reach these screws. Even with the extension connections, it doesn't fit in the area. It's still too large. The top does come off completely. There are no cables or anything attaching it to the rest of it, so you won't have to worry about that. There is a metal plate that covers everything on the inside. So to get to the rest of it, you do have to take that off. These are also all the same size, and the same Phillips head. So you shouldn't have an issue. Just keep them separate from the ones underneath. They are different sizes, so you will be able to tell them apart. I believe there was 8 of them, but I could be mistaken. And once all the screws are out, I had to kind of wiggle it a little bit to get it to release from the rest of the motherboard. Now I can remove the rest of it out of the bottom of the case, and I took out more screws than was needed. There were 4 screws going around where the cartridge holder is, but only 2 of them were holding it to the motherboard. As far as the screws on the rest of the motherboard, there is a difference between the screws that were holding the cartridge slot down to the motherboard and the screws that were holding everything down to the rest of the case. So make sure you keep those separate, but they're different colors and different lengths, so you will definitely be able to tell them apart. Once the screws are removed, there are 3 more cables that you need to unplug to release it all. 2 of them are for the controller. Remember which one is controller number 1 and controller number 2 so that you don't mix them up when you plug it all back together. The top one here is number 1 and the side one here is number 2. I'm really glad that this system is in such good condition, but there's definitely some dust on the inside and it could use a wipe down. After it's completely removed, the metal plate that's on the bottom does come off. And I did remove the rest of the screws that hold the slot for the cartridges down since there was a lot of dust in it. And once again, I really wanted to just clean everything. So now I'm just gonna go through and wipe everything down and clean everything off with some isopropyl alcohol. I'm also taking a look at the pins on the inside, since I know this is a common issue with these systems, that the pins don't get enough contact to read the games properly. Now, I did buy replacement slot master parts if something does eventually go wrong with this system and I have to replace this area, but right now it's still looking like it's really good. We haven't had too much issue with most of these games, so I'm just gonna see where everything's at and make sure there's nothing too much out of place. The cartridge holder goes on really easy. It just kind of slides back into place, and then there's 2 screws holding it down to the motherboard, but then the rest of the screws hold it down to the shell. There are 3 little metal, I don't know if you want to call them brackets or pressure points, but when you put the metal plate back at the bottom of the motherboard, just make sure that you get this slot around them so you don't bend them out of place. Now I'm gonna clean the inside of the shell, and it's really dusty. I don't think you can see it as much on the gray surface, but I can see it when I am working on it. Now I can plug in the cables and make sure that I put the correct ones in the correct spots. And then flip it back over and just kind of get everything in the correct spot. And once everything's lined up, the motherboard will sit down perfectly in the shell. Now I can put all the screws back in place. I can put the metal plate back on top and put those screws back. And then I'll put the lid on, as well as use some isopropyl alcohol to clean off the top. These little vents up here definitely collected a lot of dust, and now that I'm putting the top back on, I can really see them. And then don't forget to flip it back over and put the 6 screws on the back. So this is the Power Glove. I did get this complete in box and it was still wrapped up, so I don't know if this has been used before. From what I could find on it, it was designed by a gentleman called Samuel Cooper Davis for Age, which is the Abrams Gentile Entertainment, which was made by Mattel in United States and PAX in Japan. The glove has the NES controller buttons on the forearm, and it also has a program button and then buttons that are labeled 0 through 9. And these are used to input specific commands, and this includes changing the firing rate. And with this, you can do hand motions that control your characters on the screen. So there are 2 ultrasonic speakers in the gloves and then 3 that go on the TV. And the speakers take turns transmitting a short burst of 40 kilohertz. And it's pretty neat, but it measures the time it takes for the sound to reach the microphones, and then it does the math, and this will calculate the yaw and roll, but it couldn't calculate the pitch of your hand. So with the Power Glove, there were also 2 specific games released with it. The Super Glove Ball and Bad Street Brawler, which I bought both so we could test them. There's also a list, I'll leave a link in the description below, of games that were compatible with the Super Glove. So I did go out and buy a couple of these. Some of these I was not able to get a hold of because they were just too expensive, like Castlevania, but some of them I already had and didn't know, like Top Gun. So let's have a look at the games that are compatible with the Power Glove and let's see how this all works. This first game is Bad Street Brawler, and it's a side-scroller beat 'em up, and this was released on the Commodore 64, but because it was released on the NES, it's one of the versions that is specifically designed to use the Power Glove accessory. Now, as you can see, I am having a little trouble getting anything to work, and I will explain after we make it through the games. This next one is Top Gun. I have never been a huge fan of the movie. I know, don't hate me, but the game itself is pretty neat. It was a little confusing to figure out, but once I understood what I needed to do, I think this is a pretty cool game. It's an air combat game, and you play Maverick, and he flies an F-14 Tomcat. The next one I got was called Rad Racer, and interestingly enough, when I put it in the system, a very familiar screen popped up. And sure enough, my husband and myself had just played this game on the Famicom. But in Japan, it's called Highway Star. I'm not too sure why names get changed for games except to be more appealing to one area versus the other one. But Rad Racer and Highway Star are the same exact games, just one is Famicom and one is the NES system. This game has 8 courses from across the world, and it's one of the earlier racing games for the NES. The next game is Robo Warrior, and it kind of reminds me of a Bomberman game. And it does state that it's a sequel to Bomberman, but you basically put the bombs down, blow up the area without blowing yourself up, and then kill the enemies. Obviously, I had to buy Bubble Bobble because I am a huge fan of this game. I probably own a couple different versions of this game, and no matter what system, I'm a huge fan of playing it. This has 100 levels, and it was released by Taito in 1986. And this is also one of the first games to feature two-player cooperative play and multiple endings. This game is called Life Force, and I know I've seen this around in a couple other systems because of the snake on the front. I guess it's also called Salamander, or known as Salamander. And it's a shoot 'em up game, side scroller, and it also has vertical scrolling stages. It's considered a spin-off of Gradius. And this last game is the one specifically made for the glove ball, like Bad Street Brawler. And this one's called Super Glove Ball. And this one definitely took me a bit to figure out what was going on. It's kind of like a breaking bricks game, and you catch the ball and release it to hit the rest of these bricks. However, I'm not too sure what the rest of it is, and I'll definitely have to play it more to figure out what's going on. But it seems pretty neat, and I'm definitely excited to give it a go. So I'm glad we got the NES cleaned up and the cartridge slot moves like it's supposed to, and we haven't had issues since. I'm thinking maybe since it was just an older system, it got a little worn out, so maybe just cleaning it up gave it some new life. As far as the Super Glove, unfortunately, I did not pay as much attention because I bought it here. But if you didn't know, because I didn't really pay attention to this, but like most things, the Japanese version and the American version are just a little different. I have the Japanese version, but the NES is an American version. So it doesn't plug in to the NES. This is the NES controller plug-in, and this is the Super Glove plug for mine. So unfortunately, Bad Street Brawlers would not work with a regular controller. Now, I don't know if that's because there's something wrong with the game or if it can only be used with a glove and not a regular controller. Because I could definitely play Super Glove Ball with a controller and all the other games except for that one. So now I need to look at buying a compatible adapter, which I'm not having too much luck in finding, or make my own adapter. And for the life of me, I cannot find the website that I saw, but there was a gentleman that was doing the opposite. He was converting his NES controllers to the Famicom, but he had the schematics where all the pins were marked. So maybe I can reverse it and make an adapter to be able to plug my Japanese Power Glove into my American NES. So unfortunately, I have not been able to use the Power Glove. I'm sorry. I was really excited about it because I didn't even know this was a thing until I found it. So hopefully I can figure this out and make an adapter, and I'll definitely make a video on it to try to help anybody else out there. And then I'll go back and give the games a go. So let me know in the comments if you have a Power Glove or if you've ever used one and what's your favorite game to play and if you even enjoy using it. Because from what I could tell, it seemed like it didn't work too well and it was kind of one of those things that came out but wasn't as good as it could be, but was good for the time. No matter what, I'm probably going to use it for specific games and that's it. I still think it's really cool and I'm glad I have one and I'm glad I get to experience something that I didn't get to do when I was younger. Let me know in the comments what your favorite NES game is or Famicom game because I am down to play either. And hopefully sometime soon I'll be able to post some videos of these games. I'll leave a link in the description below of the Slot Master that I bought for preparedness just in case ours ever breaks. So I hope you enjoyed this video of the NES and the Power Glove. And as always, if you liked this video, please like and subscribe, share with your friends, and I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Bye!